Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello. I'm just allowing people in right now. People are still trickling in. Feel free to, show your face. This is going to be just a nice conversation amongst us all. Hey, Poochie. Hey, Crystal.
Hey, everyone.
It's nice to see your faces. Still allowing people in. Oh my goodness, 8 p.m. in Kenya. Wow. Washington, D.C., Baltimore. Okay.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey. How's it?
the man of the
No,
hour.
no. I'm definitely not the man of the hour. Trying to figure out. I feel like a dad right now, but I think I got this. Um, how's everyone doing?
I'm doing okay. How's everyone doing? Feel free to drop it how you're doing in the chat. Let me see if a few people are still trickling in. You're so Fuji.
I just got
um, what was
I
that,
just got
Leah?
off work. That's how I'm doing.
I feel that about that.
I'm still working. It's my lunch break right now. And man, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much, Joshua, for taking the time.
What?
Um,
No problem. Like I totally love everything you're doing and just want to be able to support as a black man, as a black male photographer, be able to support any way I can. So what you're doing is so important. We're just so inspired.
Thank you. I mean, literally just had a meeting with Marcus yesterday because you set up that connection with Nike. So hopefully that works
Yes,
out. So
I'm
thank
trying to get
you.
Nike to give black women dollars, give black women photographers gigs,
Yes.
for sure. So just trying to put the pressure on them.
Well, I mean, I could introduce you, but I don't want to butcher it because I don't know how many titles you have now.
I know I have too
And
many titles. Super African man. I gotta figure out.
I mean, how would you even introduce yourself? Let me
Honest.
go. Like, what do you lead with? Let's hear that.
Well, well, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son, before anything else. Um, I'm a photographer, director, creative entrepreneur, creative director. I'm just a creative person, I guess. Always starting something, always making trouble.
Yes. Ooh, we even have someone from Nigeria. Okay.
Hey, Lagos,
Kenya.
Niger
Yes.
people. Hey.
We are well represented in here. Everyone, thank you for taking the time to join wherever you're at, whether it's Kenya, Lagos. I saw a lot of DMV folks in the house, so thank you. Adobe Lightroom, thank you also for your role in making this happen. I think someone from the team is also enjoying this conversation, so thank you for being here. Let's get started. You're in the hot seat for, almost an hour. And we have a
Yeah,
lot of questions from the Black Women Photographers group. First, I think I'll just start with, for you, just tell us a little bit about your background and your journey up to this point and how your background, influenced you and your career and who you are today.
sure. Well, for people that don't know, I'm Joshua Kissi, born and raised in the Bronx to Ghanaian parents. Started photography and I guess having a connection to photos and storytelling when I was like 18, 19. Um, and that was like 12 years ago or so. So, Street Etiquette is one of the main things a lot of people know me for when it comes to Tumblr and what Black Tumblr was able to do. But before that, I just always had a curiosity to photos and storytelling. And I think seeing my parents like family albums and seeing the family albums at home really made me really inspired, right? Because I saw what lives they were living before they came to America. So a certain part of the photo album was like sepia tones. It was really warm. They had their afros. They had their like bell bottoms. They're like in the 70s living their best life before they had us. Then you keep flipping in the family album and then there's life in New York City, right? And there's darker tones. There's different type of like stories there, where it's like their first day was snow and things like that. How they lived in New York with their big puffer jackets and all this other stuff, and it was just really amazing to see from home, being from Ghana, migrating to New York in America, essentially, how much that changed. And it's just like, okay, like family albums is kind of the first memories I have as far as photographs and what my parents were kind of looking like and living their best life in Ghana compared to when they came to America. Still living a good life, but just a lot more harder, right? Like trying to get adjusted to the American system, trying to get adjusted to like a new language in some sense, but as well as raising a family with cultural values, but it's still being American, being Ghanaian American. So for me, I always found myself in that middle point where I was like, okay, African for sure, but also here in America, just getting accustomed to what it means to be Black in America as well. So I was always in that in between, right? And a lot of my stories and a lot of things I'm inspired by is because of that in between of Blackness and trying to speak to all facets of Blackness. But I think for the most part, starting Street Etiquette was like the perfect kind of playground and kind of, I mean, me and Travis met in school. He's West Indian, I was West African, and we were just like, yo, let's just do something that we haven't seen before. And I think to kind of have that perspective when it comes to like men's style, fashion, art back in 2008 was like something that wasn't like predominantly shown on the internet. So we kind of took a risk, but it became wildly popular because of the support and honestly, a lot of support from Black women, a lot of support from the Black community essentially, but people saw something that they didn't see before Instagram even existed at this point, where, you know, Black guys, Black men from the Bronx were showing a image of the Black community that wasn't widely recognized and wasn't stereotypical as well. So those are kind of my early bearings into the industry, into kind of like 10 years in running of doing work for the community. And that's how I kind of look at what I do is like, it's always for the community, right? Like I'm just a servant for the people around me, and just been blessed to be able to do so.
Do you remember your first role, like your first job, you know?
First job, first job was with Nike at 18.
Oh.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was a styling and art direction photo job that me and Travis did. And we went to North Carolina. We went to Duke University to photograph Kyrie Irving when he was also like 18. And it was weird because like we walk in with all the Nike people and he's just like, where's the photographers? Where's the stylists? And it was like, it's these young Black dudes. He's like, wait, what? So he was surprised, you know, being 18, being a freshman in college and seeing us and kind of seeing like, here's these other young Black men who are kind of pursuing their dream. And here I am doing that through basketball. It was a nice little chat we had of like, we're both living our dreams. He's from Jersey originally, but also from New York in that way. And we're just like super proud to see each other at that space and at that level, but still being 18 years ago, well, 18 years old was like mind boggling, right? So that was my first job that I got like a W-9 for and all of that.
I mean, with that, I guess that would be one, you know, turning point, but what would you say have been other major turning points in your career along the way?
I think figuring out how much to charge for work, figuring out your value, figure out what you should be charging clients compared to like smaller businesses. And at that point, there wasn't like reference sheets. So I would just honestly, like, it was a lot of trial and error. I'm like, okay, if I need a new laptop, how do I calculate? How do I calculate how much it's going to cost to get this new laptop? Like, it was just that basic for me. And unfortunately, you learn through the hard, you know, trials and experiences. But I think it was Urban Outfitters reached out and they were just like, hey, we want you to style this lookbook, blah, blah, blah. And I just went to apple.com and was like, how much is this laptop going to cost? So I was like, cool. Like, estimated it. It was just like, hey, we'll charge you 4K, whatever, like 4,000 to style and photograph this. And they responded like in a minute. It was like, yes. And that's when I knew I was like, okay, we probably went too low, but like, I'm happy I got my laptop. Like, I'm not mad or what the case is. But pricing, especially when it comes to Black artists, Black women, Black men, I think it's really important to like understand our value when we come to the table, because a lot of times, you know, they want to make sure you get the lowest price possible. Or if like, and a lot of us are just happy to be in a room, right? Where I'm like, oh, I'm working with Urban Outfitters, I'm working with Nike or whoever. I'm just happy to do the work. But at the same time, like we bring so much more to the table than that, even more to folks that charge way more than us when they come to the table. So for me, I think pricing, the business of photography, the business of creativity, was really a turning point, because then I was able to show my parents like, hey, look, I can make a living out of this. Like, I actually can move out of your house.
African parents, yes.
Yeah, African parents are definitely not trying to hear that. Like, or, you know, just, you know, immigrant parents or first generation, or just first generation into like this country or wealth, or like working class to middle class, like whatever it is, right? There's always this barrier of fear of like making sure you're doing the right thing for the family and making sure you're doing the right thing for yourself. So me and my dad had a really serious sit down, and he was just like, I'm giving you 2 years. Like, if you don't make this fashion photo thing work in 2 years, like, you're going back to school and we're going to pick the major for you. And I was like, oh no, like they're going to pick the major. I was like, nah. I was like, this thing, I got to get successful, whatever it is. I need to figure this thing out. And like just through his blessing and understanding, honestly, because I wasn't necessarily telling what I was doing, but when I was able to be more open and be like, hey, this is my dream, this is what I want to do, just getting that support and acknowledgement was enough for me. Like just for you to hear me out, right? Like I don't have to hide and do what I'm doing. I could do it openly. You could just support. That gave me a lot of confidence in the work I wanted to create.
Yes, I feel like everyone can relate to that or aspects of that. And you know, as we talk, feel free if you have a question to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask Joshua while he's here. You know, you can ask along the way. And you know, something you touched on. So like the business side, I feel like that isn't stressed enough. And you know, for you to find that, I guess, sense of worth and knowing your worth and determining
Yeah.
that, you know, how exactly did you feel ready to do that? I mean, I think it's easy to say, okay, 4,000 from Urban Outfitters, bet.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us never, you know, maybe have not earned that much. So they may think, okay, that's cool. You know, that's a lot of money. But then from a brand standpoint, is it though? Like to your point. And so how do you actually get to that point where you feel like, okay, this is my worth. How do I calculate this? How do I know when to increase my rates every time as you progress? You know, your rates change. I mean,
Yeah.
I know your rates have changed. So, you know, how do you actually get to that point? You know what I'm saying?
No, that's a great question. I think it's also knowing like what type of photography you want to do, right? Like, are you a commercial photographer? Are you a portrait photographer? Are you, journalistic? Like all these different things really impact the price. Because if you get contracted by the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, the prices of editorial are pretty much set most of the time. Like, it's $150 stipend, this, that, like that's pretty much the world that you're going to be revolving around. But that's not a bad thing, right? Like that's how you get your work out there from an editorial perspective. From my personal experience, I'm now doing editorial, right? Like the cover I did with Cynthia Erivo for InStyle and some of the other like more notable celebrity driven stuff. Like throughout my whole career, I've never really done that, right? So I've done the commercial work first, which is like the Nike, Adidas, the Microsoft, the Starbucks, and that, rather than going into the editorial. So I think both things are really important. But to your question, there are set rates when it comes to editorial. When it comes to commercial, it depends if you're getting approached by an agency or you're getting approached by the brand directly. There's a lot of ways that money in photography moves because there's also licensing agreements, and a lot of people forget that. So a lot of companies will try to bulk in licensing agreements into the photographer fee, and it's like, no. Actually, I should be paid separately for licensing one photo or 12 photos to you. And I was only able to discover that once I had like a rep and agent, but also asking questions, right? Asking questions to my peers like, hey, I saw, this company approached us, because if they're approaching one Black photographer, they're probably approaching like 5 or 6. So I'll speak to, a Micaiah or Adrian or whoever and be like, hey, they're hitting us up. This is what they hit me with. What do they hit you with? And I think it takes community, right? And I think that's why platforms like Black Women Photographers is so important, because like it brings a lot of the transparency into the industry that a lot of people are like trying to keep to their chests. And because like art and creativity is so scarce, people are very protective about their numbers. People are very protective about telling you how much they made or how much they want to make or how much they earn. But it's really like breaking that down and just finding the right resources, whether it's online or peer-to-peer groups, to try to figure out like, okay, how much should I charge if I'm in the editorial photography space? How much should I charge if I'm in the commercial photography space? What's my day rate? You know what I mean? What's my retouching rate as well? What's the licensing rate as well? So there's a lot of ways that now, because of the immediacy of Instagram and immediacy and accessibility of the industry, a lot of these numbers are being crunched into just like, oh, we just have 5K for this project and that's it. Like, and you need to figure out everything else. So like, there's a push and pull when it comes to rates and fees, because you can stand by your rate and fee, but a company may be like, well, this is all we have. And it's just figuring out like, is this a revenue play? Is this a relationship play? Or is this a portfolio play? Like you really got to ask yourself, like what options am I looking towards when I'm entertaining these types of deals or these types of projects? So those are the first 3 things I ask myself every time I get an email or inquiry. If it's a revenue play, like, you got to pay your bills, but you may not be so happy with what you create. And that's the hardest part. And that's what editorial brings you, right? Like editorials low fee because they want you to be able to express your creative voice. So they're like, hey, we're giving you more creative freedom to do what you want to do. That's why the price is not crazy. But more times when you're getting more money, they're just telling you what to do. And they're just bringing you in and being like, hey, we have this amazing budget, but we want this, this, that, and this. So it's just finding that balance of like making sure your work has a voice, making sure your work is not just an echo within the room. So when companies approach you, they know exactly what you're going for. They know exactly what you like to shoot. And being able to work with them in that level has always been more beneficial than just being, the kind of run of the town photographer, which, I have no shots or angst about, but I think it's really important to have that voice and have that foundation locked down. So when you get approached, you know why you're doing what you're doing and what you say yes to. So it's a tricky dance, but there's a lot of moving parts to it.
I mean, all of that is really helpful and very enlightening, as someone has mentioned in the comments. Something about finding the voice, though. I feel like now everyone, when they see your work, it's hard. Like now when people see your work, sometimes you don't even have to be tagged and people know, oh, that's a Joshua's photo, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that must be an amazing feeling. But I guess, what advice would you have for photographers who are still trying to find their voice and be able to
Yeah.
stand out like that?
I mean, there's that's a great question because I feel like because I've been doing it for a while, like I've taken certain things and just try to make it a signature in a way, but also explore, right? Like discover and explore. Just as Black people, like we're already at a kind of disadvantage when it comes to photography. Like the actual camera being able to, photograph our skin the way we want it to be is an uphill battle. So early on, I just always found like, hey, like I need to really figure out like how I'm editing Black skin, how I'm lighting Black skin, how I'm photographing Black skin, because there isn't enough of it out there. So anything we do collectively is a reference point, and that reference point helps to like inform the next generation of photographers to think like, okay, I love this person's work. I would love to create work like that. And there's only a few photographers I was able to find, from Jamel Shabazz to Gordon Parks, and mostly Black men photographers, right? Not even a lot of Black women photographers to be able to reference to. But now I feel like we're in a point now where it's like you just have to study what people have done before, and I just studied my favorites and try to do it a little bit differently. So I looked at Malik Sidibe in Senegal and be like, oh man, when I go back to Ghana, I would love to photograph something that's like that, but maybe not black and white, but in color, but maybe more contrast, maybe more low saturation when it comes to the actual skin. And I think a lot of people are able to identify my photographs just based off of Black skin. And I've just taken a liking to Black skin itself. Like my composition may not be that good, or like, the styling or whatever, but as far as the skin is concerned, I'm dialed into that. And that's what I've kind of like made my thing. But now, because I have, more opportunities and more experience to think around like, what does, composition, styling, location, all these different things that add to a photo really look like. And I think it's really breaking down your photo to the bare basics. Like if you just have a white room, right, with the subject, like what does it look like? Like what do you want to photograph? Because before you build in sets or before you build in styling, but like all you have is a person's face, their height, their weight, and like how do you just make sure you have a signature at that level before you add all the different other parts? And that's what I was able to do and be like, okay, at the bare minimum, I want skin to look amazing every time. I want light to look amazing every time. I want our skin to look real, but to look realer than real, right? And I think for for a lot of photographers, we're always trying to figure out how do we make sure we're photographing things that feel close to our experiences, but as well as still aspirational. And that's what I was also inspired to do and to continue to do. So I've kind of like navigated off of Lightroom and Photoshop, honestly, and went more into Capture One because I just like the way it rendered skin. And I was just like, I've been on Photoshop, and I mean, I just realized this is a Lightroom and Photoshop talk. So I'm like, people are probably like, this guy's crazy. But no, I did start out on Lightroom and Photoshop, and I still use it on some level. But I've tried to try different programs that produce different results when it comes to skin. And I think that's like super important when it comes to our skin, because we're not, the first thought of demographic when it comes to photography, when it comes to image making. So I just try to do enough research. Then there's not enough research out there, right? So everything we're doing now is pretty much a reference point to the future, and I think that's important, and it's continuing to do that. So now I'm like, oh man, Lightroom and Photos, they're gonna hate me. Adobe's gonna hate me, but like,
They
I'm,
don't hate you. They don't hate you.
no, I'm just being honest. I love Adobe and Lightroom. I mean, I love Photoshop and Lightroom, especially for pushing tones. But at the same time, some of the dials could be really aggressive. So it's really figuring out like how do you get the incremental changes in photos that like impacts skin tone and shadow and contrast. And honestly, I don't think a lot of these companies are putting in the work to really think around what black skin looks like in these programs. I'm sorry, but it's just what it is, right? So we're constantly trying to figure out workarounds just to exist within that. And to me, that's the problem.
The chat is popping right now. I see a couple questions on the related note. Zainab, I hope I'm saying your name right. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask, or would you like me to say it out loud?
Hey, I'm Zainab. I'm based in Oakland, California right now. I'm from Inglewood. I had two questions. The first is kind of just like if you could speak more to learning, like how do you learn the technicalities of lighting skin on set outside of, trial and error in terms of like warm skin tones, cool skin tones? Do you have, I don't know, like do you have a certain, just a certain process in mind to figure out how do you just get that luminance and how do you get that brilliance in black skin, considering or even already being aware of the way that Lightroom may, undersaturate and just like make black skin pretty ashy?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think when it comes to being on set, you try to start out with natural light, right? Like whatever your natural eye is giving you, that's something to go based off of. Like before any other complications or lights or anything, it's like, okay, what am I seeing? Where's the light coming from? Is it backlit? Is it front lit? Is the light coming from this side? Like similar to my office here, like the light comes from here. So you get this highlight here, but the rest of my face is like shadow, right? So it's figuring out those things that your naked eye sees and being able to build from there. On top of that, continuous light is a really good way to learn lighting because it's also another way to see is like what you see is what you get with continuous light, right? The light, when I say continuous light, obviously is the light that just stays on, and it's not strobe. So you don't need a pocket wizard or anything else. As soon as you go into like strobing, that's when it gets a little bit more complicated because you don't see the light until you click the button and the lights go off and it gives you that strobe effect.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'll start it out with continuous light to be able to see like whatever I'm seeing with my eyes, what I'm gonna get. And from there, honestly, there's more diversity in black skin tone than any other skin tone. People have red undertones, people have magenta, people have green undertones. People like there's so many different types of ways to light black skin. And I don't think like anybody's unfortunately has done it justice to show that, right? The research and everything that goes into that. So when I think about it, I'm like, okay, what skin tone is this person? Is it more of a warmth that I want to achieve, or is it more of a cooler tone? Similar to when makeup artists do makeup, they look at us and they figure out like, okay, what type of tone do I want to go with when it comes to this person's skin color? And it's just similar to photography. Like that's how much diversity there is when it comes to black skin tone. So I don't necessarily have a book per se that's like, here's these 6 different things that I do every time I walk on set. But there's just this instinct I have when I'm walking on set, like, okay, I see this person's skin tone, I see the light I have. What do I want to achieve? Like, what am I trying to say? Do I want it to be underlit on purpose? Because there's a way to photograph black skin that's, not necessarily popping in the highlights, but just has, that dull effect. But some people want that dull effect when it comes to like the flatness and things like that. I've seen certain photographers do that, which looks really beautiful. It just depends on like, what do you want black skin to say? Like what in your imagination, what does that look like, right? And for me, like I just love the richness of it. And I think it's just being from Ghana and like most 90% of people in Ghana got good skin. I don't know. Like that shea butter, cocoa butter, I don't know what. But at the same time, I just love seeing skin illuminate and skin feel like skin, right? I just love seeing that. that whole like dewy look and all. Like I just love seeing that, honestly. So that's kind of my thing. But you have to figure out like, you know, what's your perspective on it when it comes to blacks? Is it similar? Is it a mixture? Is it depending on who you're shooting, what you're shooting as well? So yeah.
Thank you. I know you said you may transition to work with Fenty Skin.
I was like, I want
I
to be a
saw that.
skinfluencer. And I was like, yo, I mean, these people are collecting bags. I was like, I need to be a skinfluencer. Glossier, holla at me. Fenty, holla, like I'm down. I'm down to put in the work. My wife's like, you're wild. You need to sit down somewhere. But but yeah, no, I think black skin is truly, truly important. And I think it wasn't until that article that came out about how color film stock wasn't necessarily made for black skin. It was made to photograph wood furniture or chocolate and things like that. And that's how, like, when you think about it, like technologically, that's how something was invented without us in mind, right? So imagine if it was with us in mind. So now we're like doing the work because those same color film stocks are the same stocks that are in Photoshop or in Lightroom, and like it is what it is. When you get your presets, like they're all based off of that. So when you see it's like, it's too much of a green skin tone. It was too much of, like, it just wasn't necessarily made for us. So we always have to make those adjustments over time.
Now we already halfway in, and so we have more questions to ask. One is from Lauren. She asks, how has your experience with photography translated into your current transition to film and directing and projects? And what have you learned through that transition?
Oh, that's an amazing question. I won't even lie, like film in motion is so hard. It is so hard. Like I won't even lie. I think because, you know, most photo shoots you're walking in, you know, you kind of got your sets and ideas you want to get across. You do that, you photograph, you go home, and it's like a little bit more of a simpler process. With film, there's the AD, there's this person, there's that person, line producers, and all types of people like there to make sure you get a great image. And I mean, on photo shoots as well, there's a grip team, you have a light tech, you have a digitech, but in the motion world, there are DIT. So there's all these other different aspects. I think motion is harder because it's a moving still. So it's not just about like having good lighting here, but do you have good lighting here? But do you have good lighting when they go like this? Do you have good? So there's like every time somebody moves, there's a different opportunity for error. Like that's what I see, and I'm like, damn, I got to make sure that when we light the set or what we're doing here is actually within my vision. And I think the hardest part is really when it comes to narrative films, like how do you make sure an actor evokes a certain emotion, and how do you coach them through that? And that's just a really hard process because you have to be a people person to be able to speak to people. And most photographers are like, you speak to them like, hey, like, how you doing? Getting to know you a little bit. I'm taking photos, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to motion, it's just a lot more work and a lot more people on set to make sure you have the perfect image. And that may change in the next hour. So it's just like one of those things where for me, it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me learning. And I don't know, I get inspired when I'm not like actually really good at something and I just have to put in the work to continue to get better. So I'm like inspired by that room for error, inspired by the need to continue to improve. And I still feel like that way within photography. I still look at some of my photos and cringe and be like, like I know I could be better. But it's a tough balance, right? Because you don't want to necessarily beat up on yourself or be your biggest critic. But honestly, like that's some of my biggest challenges, looking at my work and be like, well, I didn't like that, or I didn't like this. And when you're working with editorial partners, that's the photo that they'll choose and be like, this is the cover. I'm like, oh God, like, so I've been learning through like, what does that look like and the challenges of working with photo editors, because doing editorial work will crush you, honestly. Like it's some of the toughest things because you're given creative freedom, but then it's taken back. Like, we want you to do whatever you want, but only from this perspective. It's like, oh, okay, like that's not fun no more. Like, so it's one of those things where you're constantly learning how to deal with people. And honestly, that's the skill and asset I feel blessed to have, is to be able to deal with a lot of different type of people. Because if you don't know how to deal with people, it's gonna be a hard industry for you, because it's just like, it's relationship based first, and then everything else on top of that. So it's like, even if you're the most artistic, creative person, if you're not communicating well, if you're not being held accountable, if you're not holding people accountable around you, if you're not like all these different aspects goes into creativity before you even get to the camera, before you even get to set and like press click. There's a lot of communication that needs to happen. There's a lot of understanding that needs to happen to make sure you have the most smooth transition and process on set once you get there. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of like, I mean, they call it PPM, like pre-production meetings, but just thinking before you get on set, what do you need to do to make sure you're lined up for success? And that's like the best part possible.
Talk to us about that. Like, what is, and I see that's in the comments as well, what is your typical day like, your workflow? How do you get from idea to set to grand finale and having that vision, like, come to life? Talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, I'm constantly fishing for new ideas, right? And for me, I think it's important to recognize that inspiration can start on the internet, whether it's Instagram or Tumblr, but like research should start off of Instagram. If you want to research something, you should be hitting some real like hard critical thought materials or like Instagram is where I go when I want to get inspired. But if I want to research something, I kind of have to go off of Instagram and find other things or galleries or assets or Pinterest is good too sometimes, or just going into the library or like online databases and really looking at some like archival imagery is important. And sometimes those archival imagery will make themselves onto Tumblr and Pinterest and things like that and Instagram. But sometimes like you watch something so much, your eye begins to become very similar to all the stuff you're watching or the people that you're inspired by, which is great. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to make sure that this common thread feels like me. So my process is always researching, and I think when I say researching, I'm just more so listening to people. I'm also asking questions, like normal everyday conversations. I'll just be walking down the block and speak to an older lady in my neighborhood and like get inspired by an idea because she was talking about when she was in Colombia, and dancing in this spot and whatever it is. It's just like the ideas come from everywhere for me. But I'm always asking myself when it comes to work, like what does this add to the narrative? If I'm not adding anything new to the story, maybe I'm not the right person to tell that story. But also understanding the privileges I have as a African American, Ghanaian-American male, right? Like I'm not going to be sitting here and be like, hey, I want to tell all of the queer stories because that's me. Like, no, like I don't want to take up space in that way. So I really try to ask myself, if I can't do this job, like who else can I amplify or recommend or elevate in that way to be able to tell those stories, because it needs to legitimately come from the source. And I truly believe that. So as much as I've had the privilege to like tell general Black stories, I understand that I'm also not generationally African American at that, right? So there's still a space of privilege that you operate of to know that like, hey, somebody also needs to tell this type of story, right? As well. So I think the more nuanced, the better. And that's what I think about concepts is like the more detailed and nuanced we could get with the work we're creating, especially when it comes to like Black centered work, the better, because then they can't just be like, okay, for Black people, you're either this or that. It's either this polarizing things when it should rather be like, yo, our work, our lives in permanence, right? Like there's so many different aspects of our lives and how we live life. Whether you're in like Bahia, Brazil, whether you're in South Africa, whether you're in Compton, whether in a crowd, wherever you're at, like I just love to tell Black stories. I don't care where on the earth we're at. So it's just be able to like show the nuance and kind of like, the depth of our stories and not just like during trauma, struggle times and just having the work be that. So I guess I'm kind of answering the question, but I'm also going all over the place. But when it comes to how my work starts a lot, I think I'm always building mood boards. Even if I don't have a shoot in mind, I'm building a mood board just in case something that comes that may fit that. So I'm like, oh, I remember like, 6 months ago, I built a mood board that felt like this. Let me go revisit that. Maybe this could fit for this concept. So I'm always like moving things around and seeing if they make sense for present day concepts. So I use this app slash website that WeTransfer has called Paste. And it's a nice way to build fast mood boards, get some decks out and just start thinking around the ideas, whether it's like lighting composition, subject matter, color, tone. Like I'll kind of have all these things organized and just continue to add to it.
So I asked the women on the group, you know, to get their portfolios ready because I'm gonna just pick someone.
Wow. The pressure. I'm like, whoa,
Yes,
I was
because
not prepared.
no, because I think the thing is, because a lot of what you're saying is very key, but it's also to translate and to make sure that translates for who you want to work with. How do you make your portfolio stand out? You know, let me share my screen right now to show people. Um, so does everyone see this okay?
Yes, we
So
do.
this is the one and only
Oh,
Joshua Kissi site.
oh, the pressure. I'm like, oh.
So, I mean, when you're talk to us about your process, so how do you even begin to showcase your work in the best way for that way, you know, brands and whoever that you'd want to work with, you know, comes calling? Like, how do you get to this point and how do you decide, you know, sequencing and what to leave out and how often do you update it?
Yeah,
You know, that kind of thing. And then I'm gonna show you one member, Poochie. She already knows, she knows ahead of time. You know, any tips on where she could approve
sure.
and for general advice for the group on how to approve their work.
No, for sure. For me, like I want to be able to show that I'm a diverse Black photographer, right? Like 10 years ago when I was just thinking around the work I was doing, I knew that there were certain clients that weren't going to work with me because I'm shooting Black and brown people all the time. And I've already accepted that. I was like, well, I'm happy to be a service to my community. I'm happy to tell these stories because all of the other stories has been told already. Like I don't necessarily want to waste time doing that. And I remember this one client was like, "Hey, like, do you shoot white people?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What?" I was like, I mean, if they're in the story, but if they're not in the center of it, like that's fine. But if they're in the center of it, I don't necessarily want to shoot that. And they felt so offended. I won't name the brand, but I was just like, I shoot everybody, but also I particularly love to shoot stories that I'm inspired by, and that's Black and brown stories and minority stories, or like they got to be something there. I just can't be able to create the same things that's already been created, like right. That's not really my specialty. So I think for the most part, when it goes to like what I want to show is I want to show work that I feel like has my creative touch or has my stamp on it, but also be able to show work like for that example or the tiger stuff, which was funny, like I normally don't photograph celebrities, right? And that was necessarily never my thing. I was just like, I love the everyday perspective and I love to have this narrative that shows, the depth of Blackness. But at the same time, when it comes to celebrityism, I felt like a lot of people also need to see them in a humanized everyday perspective. So with him being a rapper, I was just like, hey man, I'm gonna have you kind of looking different out here, but if you're down with it, let's do it. And he was totally into it. So it's also being able to show this kind of everyday lens, creative play within celebrity culture, because it's also not easy to photograph celebrities. I'll say that. Like people come with their own stuff. So if you're not headstrong, like it's tough to deal with some of the more notable people. But I think what I try to do is establishing a connection early with them to be able to speak. Like even if I could get on the phone with you for 5 minutes or get on Zoom for 5 minutes, just be able to build some rapport. So when they come on set, there's an appreciation for everything that everybody does. And like similar to when I was photographing Jaden Smith, he came on set and he was just like, we're gonna make the best photos ever. That's the first thing he said when he came on set. Like it wasn't like I had to prep him up to, like he was already there. So I was like, oh, this dude is different. Like, okay, like half of my job is already done because he's already in a mentality of taking great photos. So it goes to show like it depends on who you photograph as well. But like I loved photographing him because the man didn't complain once. But out there it was 110 degrees. I was sweating. Everybody was sweating. This kid didn't ask for water. He didn't sweat. I was just like, yeah, he was in a different mental space. He was like, yeah, I live around here, so I'm good. I was like, okay, cool. But at the same time, he challenged me to be more creative. He was like, what if we go like this? Or, what if we like, you got to have a person in mind that's going to challenge you that way. And that's the fun part where it's like the photo speaks for themselves because the person that was also being photographed knew that everybody on set is doing something that benefits me, right? And I think that's the important part to look at when you think about work. So when it comes to work that I show on my website, I want to show my capabilities, but I also want to show the things I aspire to do, right? So you don't get locked into one place. And I think it's really important to show like, okay, here's where I live, but I don't mind like also stretching over here or stretching over there, doing food photography or doing portrait and food. For me, is like as long as it's based around people, I'm down to do it, right? So I think it's really important to just show that here's my favorite work, here's the work I want to get hired for. Because if you don't show the work you actually want to get hired for, people are not going to hire you for it. They're going to think you can't do it. And that was the biggest thing for me is like I wasn't really necessarily getting those like big press opportunities because I didn't photograph notable or celebrity people. And that's most of the people that's on these magazine covers. Or if you're photographing models, then fashion outlets will reach out to you. So it's like what you photograph is what you're going to receive. So you just have to be able to keep in mind of you're not just creating beautiful imagery just to create beautiful imagery. Like what type of imagery are you trying to create attracts the type of clients you get.
So I have Poochie's portfolio up.
Hey, this looks
Poochie.
amazing, by the way. Shout out to Gucci. This looks great.
So Poochie, tell us real quick, what do you want to, shoot? What are you shooting? And what are you trying to attract, as Joshua is saying? And Joshua, give us your feedback.
The pressure. Oh my God.
So I shoot mainly portraiture, and I would like to do editorial. Right now I'm just like shooting my friends.
That's how I started. I'm
Um,
mad.
so yeah, I started off as doing like nature landscape, and I just kind of like transitioned into portraiture. And I too like shooting, Black people. That's what I'm interested in doing, but mostly just editorial. Um, I do also enjoy doing kind of like a photojournalistic approach as well.
Love
I
that.
document a lot of my roommate and her son
Mhm.
throughout quarantine. I've been doing that. But yeah, I just like photographing Black people.
You should put that on a shirt. Like, hey, I just like photographing Black people. I'll just walk around with that shit. No, I love it. The work is beautiful. I really feel you have a diverse range of tones as well, but it's also something very intimate about how you're photographing. Like, I feel these people's comfort level in front of your lens, and I think that's important because you could immediately feel like when the person is not comfortable who's being photographed. So I feel that within your work, but as well as like having a Black woman lens is really important, and and I think that's really pointed to the work you do and the work we need to see more of. So I love that the fact that it has that lens and communication and filter to it because people need to be able to understand that like even these portraits in the mirror, and like there's a certain intimacy where you have to let your guard down, and I feel like only a Black woman will be able to understand like a shot of a Black woman looking in the mirror could mean so much as far as how we're viewed in society, as far as like how it could be so many different things of like this mirror reflection. I think is super super important, but as well as an amazing dynamic to include in your work. um, and that could be translatable in so many different ways, right? Like, is that a series of Black women in the mirror, or Black women being able to speak to where they're at right now in so many different ways? So I think that's why I love portraiture, because essentially I love people. So it's just like being able to learn more about people only begins to inform more of your portraiture work. Like the more you know, the more you'll be able to photograph. So I think that's really, really important to be able to continue to speak to people, or at least be reading about different types of dynamic of relationships, different stories. Like that's what always gets me going. It's like listening to podcasts, meeting new people, um, being around people, communities, like everything for me. And I feel like that's one of the large reasons I was able to find success was like the community I surrounded myself by. So it wasn't just me, right? Like when people mention my work, like yeah, like it's great, but at the same time, I'm only able to do that type of work because of either the makeup person or the stylist or the art director or the person I had a conversation with that actually inspired this idea. So it's like I always realized that the picture is just bigger than me, and being able to be on set and photograph is like one of the lasting parts of it and one of the last parts of the stages. But it's like there's so much more that goes into a photograph before you click that button, and that's what I've realized is being able to do that work.
Thank you. And I know I put you on the spot, but thank you for that. We have a few more questions and almost out of time, but I would be, I cannot, have a conversation with you and not ask about Queen Bee.
Oh,
I saw that in the comments. I know people are intrigued and want to know. J. Pamela asks, what was your heart-throbbing moment or moments for the Black is King project? How do you describe its historical perspective given the current state of America?
Wow, it's a deep question. I mean, honestly, like, yeah. We could go past. We could go a little bit past two because I feel like my answer is gonna be long-winded, so it's totally fine.
Okay.
But I mean, there's so many different dynamics of it. Honestly, like seeing Black is King was like seeing a dream come true in a certain space. Because for me, growing up here, being born and raised here, but also knowing there's a whole side of myself being African that wasn't necessarily always understood or appreciated on a certain level. So to be able to see all Black people kind of galvanize around our ancestry, galvanize around our lineage was super important. And like, even if I didn't work in the creative industry, I would have been happy to just see Black is King, right? Working with Beyonce, like a Black woman that provides opportunities for all. And that's what I said to people. I was like, Beyonce is like the Big Bang effect. Like it happens, she happens, like she put her sauce on it. And like these ecosystems, these galaxies, these planets, like they're able to organize themselves in the right ways based on the work that you've already been doing. So it's not like, oh, because Beyonce did Black is King, that means that everything with Africa is relevant. Like, no, Africa is relevant before that, during that, after. So it's like, you have to be able to like make sure that you're telling the stories that are evergreen to you. And to be able to be under her direction, under her guise to create stories like this was amazing, right? From a Black woman who's been to the continent, but also is like, I'm going to put people in a position to tell the stories that have a direct connection or are there or have creative imagination when it comes to what being African means and looks like. And like, there's only so much you could really do. Like the film is called Black is King based on Lion King, queen, royalty. Like these are the themes that are just going to be in it, right? So I remember early on, everybody's like, having a feedback around like, why is there always this royalty stuff when it comes to Black stories or when it comes to, but I'm like, hey, like the Lion King is already a narrative that they had to build up off of. Like it would be different if we started from scratch when it was like, let's build our own script. Let's like, this is a Disney film at the end of the day, right? And I understood that walking into the project, but I was like, there's still an opportunity to tell such a wide array of stories of Blackness in a way that just hasn't been done before. And I don't remember the last time like something is released into the world and all Black people talked about it. Not just people in the South, not just people in LA, not just people in New York, not just people like in Africa, like every Black person talked about it and what their perspective was. And I thought that was healthy because it was like kind of a town hall meeting on Twitter or whatever, people just talking around their different perspective on Blackness or on Africanness or from the Caribbean or what have you. I just feel like we need more moments where we're able to have these like global dialogues as a people where we're able to like dial in a little bit more and see that, we're actually more similar than different. And like, all the things that we believe about ourselves or believe about the continent or our Blackness is actually not true, right? And we get to define that more and more through the work we're doing. So I think to be under the direction of a Black woman as massive and as amazing as Beyonce was a pleasure. And it changed my life, right? It changed my whole trajectory of work I wanted to create. And the fact that she enlisted me as one of the 7 directors who would be able to like kind of bring this image to life. I think that was amazing. And I'm like super grateful. But as well as knowing that like up until this point, I was doing the work still 10 years leading into this point. So like, it wasn't like that this is the end all be all and that's it. Like she's a music icon. She's going to continue to do the work she does, but she did it for her community. Like she did it for a young Black girl, a boy to be able to look at that and be like, wow, that's a sense of myself that I haven't seen and I want to continue to see. So I was really inspired to take part in it. Like it's still like registering to me because it's such an important moment. And from there, I was just like, I want to be able to create more stories that feel like this in motion. And that really inspired me to think around like, what does directing look like, and continue to do stories like that in that fashion. So like for me, as long as I'm telling stories about the Black community in particular, I am inspired, like, and I want to continue to do that. Like I could do this until I'm 90 and still be happy with what I'm doing. So yeah.
You know, on the subject of Queen Bee, you know, we all know about Vogue and how her role in having Tyler Mitchell, you know, shoot the first cover of a Black photographer to shoot the
Yeah.
cover. Valerie asks, you know, how can we change the tradition of getting our work seen as Black photographers? You know, Vogue, we're still waiting for a Black woman to
That's
shoot the
coming.
cover. And you
It's
know, it's like,
coming.
how do we even get to that point? Like, where do we go from here? You
Yeah.
know, this moment of Black photographers hiring Black women photographers. How do we, you know, continue this momentum? What can we do, if anything, or what
Absolutely.
should be done?
Well, actually, in this, I don't want to spill the beans. Like, I'm keeping it within the Black women photographers group. Let's just keep this here. Like, we're in it. I see all you guys. Like, we're here with it. There is a Black woman photographer photographing Vogue soon. Like, I know it. It happened. I'm happy for her. I can't wait to see all of the photos. But let's just keep that here. But it's gonna come out. I believe it's the November issue or December issue. But she killed it. I texted her and I was like, hey, do what you do, act like you're in your backyard. Like this, you've worked for this moment, right? Like Edward and Info reached out for you for a reason. Like this is it, right? So that's coming in the next 2 months. And I'm so super happy to be able to celebrate her as a Black woman from a Black man, to be able to elevate and support what she's been able to do. And the person on the cover is also a Black woman. So I think it's one of those things where like continue to do the work, right? Is really, really important. Like, not that you're looking for the validation of Condé Nast and Vogue and things like that, but if you continue to do the work, like ultimately they'll reach out. And like those things will just be accolades, you know, that take you to the next level. Like Tyler Mitchell photographing Beyonce was a major moment for his career, a major moment for being a Black person, being one of the first to do that. So it's an opportunity, but as well as like, those things are great, but it's the day-to-day, the year-to-year things that also should be important. Because it's like Condé Nast and Vogue is amazing, but at the same time, like how are we inspiring each other to also, you know, have institutions that feel like that we could hold in high regard, right? Like it's great that you could have a position or two, or you know, a diversity inclusion sector and all that good stuff, but like I want to herald and lift up the institutions that we build as well. And it just doesn't have to be fashion. It could be anything, but just being able to be like, hey, like this was made with us in mind, not just for one cover, not for a season, but for eternity. Like for me, that's the real value of it. So as much as I love Vogue and I would shoot a cover right now, if somebody asked me, but at the same time, I'm trying to think like, how do I make sure I'm spreading this opportunity to the community? How's it at the benefit of more people than just myself? And that's just who I am in my nature. But I think we also need to lift up Crown Magazine. We also need to lift up Essence Magazine. We also need to lift like there's all these other spaces, well, Jet and Ebony and all those different things should definitely be heralded because they was made with us in mind. And for Vogue and these other publications, they're great, but it's an afterthought, right? So now they're reaching out to every Black and brown photographer to photograph something, and that's great for exposure. But that's just like that's the bare minimum. Like I don't want just a meal. I want the whole table, right? For all of us. So I think it's knowing that it starts there, but it doesn't begin there. Like that's the entry point, is to shoot a cover. Like that's the entry point. That's not the highest peak and value of possible of what we're able to do, because we're so brilliant. Like, and we're geniuses at what we do. We're geniuses at the stories we tell. So we can't necessarily just be regulated to like 1 month, one cover, because it doesn't solve like the feeling that we have when we do feel otherized or feel not included in a lot of these art institutions that are already like racist to begin with. So it's just like, if you want to play with me, it's cool. I'm just gonna go build my own. I have my own ball. I'm gonna build my own friends. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna take my ball and go here. But it's so hard to, you know, complain about the art when we don't own the museum, right? So that's the way that I kind of think about it. And that's the reason why things like Black women photographers start, things like why Seeing Black starts, things like it's up to us to kind of champion the things that we want to have. And as an institution, right, like Black women photographers could say to a Vogue or say to, like, we get to hold you accountable, not just 3 people like emailing you, no, but as a movement, we get to say, here's what we're looking for. And I think that's really important to do, because a lot of times they're just like, okay, there's 2 or 3 people that are unhappy. Like, no, no, no. When it's a whole community that's unhappy, it's a different effect. It's a different impact. So I think the more and more we come together to say things as a community is really, really important, rather than like fragmented. And it's an easier way to, with that divide and conquer mindset, to be like, oh, we don't have to see them though, because it's not as a like equal, you know, message coming towards us. But like when we're able to kind of galvanize, whether it's Black Twitter or whatever it is, you see some things shift and some things change. And I think we need to do that more and more, especially in the photography community.
Woo, welcome to Joshua's TED Talk.
I'm just
Man,
honestly
preaching.
I'm preaching. No, I'm just inspired. Honestly, I'm inspired, and I'm honored to talk on here, especially as a Black man. You didn't have to reach out to me. You didn't have to like get me involved in here. So it really is an honor and pleasure to be able to speak to the art and craft and lives of so many amazing Black women, in all respects of it, right? In all gender identifications of it. I think that's really, really important to do, and it's just an honor. Well, as soon as you emailed me, I was like, yes, like I don't care what I have going on, I'm doing this, because it's so needed. And it's an honor to even speak to all these amazing Black women. I'm like, me? Like, they want to see me speak. I don't know why, but I'll do it. But I'm just so inspired by all of the Black women, including yourself, Polly, and everyone, right? We all love the Dana Scruggs and the Adrian Raquels and Alexis Hunley. Like, there's so many amazing photographers who are Black women out there right now, and I'm just inspired to see them and continue to champion them and all the work they're doing, but also the people that don't get all the biggest looks, right? And I think that's important. So that one time on Twitter when I forgot the young lady's name, she emailed me when she was like, I need to shoot for Nike. And I was just like, I just CC'd, I saw she was in LA, and I know the head of marketing and communications out there in LA, and I CC'd him in. I was just like, you need to hire her. Like, the work is there. Like,
she's in the chat right now.
Oh, she is? Oh, she is?
Hey guys, I'm actually talking to them tomorrow. So yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, it's lit. Oh, Mechlit. Oh, it's lit, Mechlit. Hey. Yeah. No, that's great. No, I love that. Like, they should hire you, and they should hire everyone, right? Like, especially since I know they're doing LA-based stories based around our communities. What else better to have us actually photograph that and be in front of it and produce it and style it and like, yeah, no, like do the whole thing. So I'm glad that it wasn't just a tweet that was like cool, but Marcus is actually owning up to it. And he's a great person, amazing. He has an amazing heart. So that tweet just landed with the right Nike employee to be like, let's take a chance on her. Let's take a chance on them. You know, maybe it is a partnership with Black women photographers where they contract everybody out for the year and just give different Black women editorial opportunities to photograph. Like I'm always trying to just think of ways to, like, bigger than just one person. How do we make sure this is community driven? How do we make sure that this is long term? And these are like those smaller opportunities that are able to open that up.
That's incredible. Well, everyone, it is 2:00. I mean, Joshua, what can we look out for you? What's next? Where should we be looking? What else? What other tea should you drop real quick?
The tea, I know. I was like, I wish I could tell who's photographing it and who's on the cover, but I'm like, they would kill me. So let's just wait the next, 2 months to see that Vogue cover photographed by a Black woman, which is going to be amazing. But as far as for me, I'm just going to continue to do the work. Like I have a lot that's going on right now, but I'm super grateful for the work and the opportunities. And I just realized that every opportunity that centers us as a community isn't a good one. So it's having the discernment to know, like, even though they're trying to center Black stories, that doesn't mean that you should always do it. Like, what's the vision? Like, what's the take back? Like, who's it impacting? Like, the money could be good, whatever the case is. But I've been pretty much like taking certain clients to school on email, just being like, I'm glad you reached out to me, but like, we got to go down the line because we can't do the performative Black storytelling thing. Like, that's not going to also help any of us, right? And I know a lot of these people have a good heart, and sometimes it'd be Black people reaching out to you. I'm like, bro, you're wilding right now. But Like, like they'll put you in to reach out to the Black folks to be able to be like, oh, like, yeah, we got another Black employee internally to reach out to Black storytellers or photographers or directors. Like, and it's like, nah, this idea is not it. Like, you shouldn't even let this idea pass you to even go email other people about it. And let me tell you why. You know what I mean? So like, I think for the most part, I'm going to continue to just fight for the things I think are right. And I think, you know, Black permanence is right in all respects, right? Like not just in our trauma, not in our struggle, but just all throughout the year. So February shouldn't be the only time we're regulated to a lot of work. And during BLM matters should be the only time that we're regulated to a lot of work. Like we have to continue to push the fold, build our communities up, just like Black women photographers and Seeing Black has so many other collectives that's been able to do that, and be able to champion each other, love on each other, support each other. Like it's so important. Like it takes nothing to go to somebody else's photo and just be like, yes, girl, like whatever it is, like it takes nothing from you to just champion other people, whether they verified, have no followers, whatever it is, just champion each other. Like that was the main reason why I've been able to just, I don't know, stay in this industry for 10 years. Is like, you know, there's like I've been in this weird space where I have people who's younger than me, but also people who's older than me. So you have the Makai's and the Tyler Mitchells and like those are great friends to me, but at the same time, like they're 5 years younger than me. So I understood like I'm not gonna see them come in and be like, you know what, I was the only Black photographer. So like these younger guys coming in, they can't do this. Like I just welcomed them with open arms and we learned from each other and we spoke about things and we were able to support each other. So it's like, it's not that this, you know, there could only be one Black person, you know, only one Black man or only one Black woman in the room. I really wanted to do away with that and show that like, yo, it's bigger than just our individual work. It's our works, right? Like plural, like what we're able to do together. So like, that's something I just always preached and believe within the community, to never feel like, you know, because the industry is changing so much and there's so much more Black photographers, the older person should feel threatened. But when I was coming in, I was getting a lot of attention from the older Black photographers of like, oh, they're young. He started on Tumblr, he started on this, like just like discrediting the work. And those are the same people reaching out and be like, hey, like love what you're doing, so inspired. So it's like, you know, like it's just interesting. But for the most part, I'm just like, support the people that are right beside you. Like it doesn't always need to be the person that's ahead of you or a person that's behind, like literally right beside you, like build those movements up with those people. And I think that's really important. And it'll show like that your journey is not necessarily just in the work you create, but like in the people that you impact. And that's right beside you. Like you don't gotta look far for that. You know what I mean? So people are like looking far and wide, sending, and you could send cold emails and do all that stuff. But I'm like, the people that you need most likely to get to that next step, that immediate next step, are right beside you. They're not so far along that you can't take the immediate next step.
And with that, I want to thank you again, Joshua, for your time. Thank you. Adobe will be reaching out. I saw that in the comments. P will reach out to you.
Adobe, no
No,
beef. You know, I got no beef with Adobe. Like, you
no,
know,
but they want to work with you. They want to work with you and for you to continue to change the game in that field. So thank you, everyone, so much. You have a lot of praise in the comments, and I just want to thank you all for taking the time. And yeah, that's a wrap. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank everybody for attending. All folks. Hey, Venicia, I see a lot of familiar, like, just thank you for coming out, listening to me. I appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, email me, message me, whatever it is. I would love to be able to connect and be able to help in any way I can to support any works you have, spread the love, whatever it is. Just so inspired to continue to do so. So, Polly, anything else you need from me or anybody I know, anybody I have contact to, please let me know. We'd love to continue to support you all and what you're doing because it's so important. Very much important. And one last story before we go.
Go ahead.
So I had a shoot in Atlanta, and I was looking for a first assistant and a second assistant. And this was for it was for Viacom, and it was a key art shoot. And I went on Twitter and I was just like, hey, looking for, you know, first or second assistant to come on set. And who responded was a Black woman. Her work was amazing. It was great natural lighting and all this other good stuff. So she comes to set, and then when she's on set, I realized that like this job is probably bigger than what she's been able to do. But everybody on set was so like, you know, they've been in this industry for a long time. So there's a lot of, you know, white males and, you know, people that know how to do the job, but just the white dudes, right? And for me, like being able to lead the photo on the set, like I spoke to her and I was just like, hey, like, how are you feeling about, you know, what we're doing? Because a lot of times we don't get the right opportunities to be on certain sets of that caliber unless you're like, you know, doing it already. But you never, like, the first chance is never like the best chance, you know what I mean? So I was just like, you know what, like, this is a Black woman. I'm not gonna have her come on the set and have people throw all this types of energies at her because she doesn't know what this type of light is, or that type of setup is, or doing this or doing that. So I just told her on the side, like, hey, like, I believe in what you're able to do right now, and that's why I got you here, but I also believe in what you're able to grow to do. So like, I just want you to know that I'm going to speak to the other people to let them know that, like, they should treat you with as much love and respect for the work you've created, and not treat you like somebody that can't do something on set, right? And I realized in that moment, I'm just like, for Black people, especially Black women, to be on those types of on those types of sets is rare, because a lot of times they're already being discounted for even being considered, right? So the fact I went on Twitter and randomly got this person who's based in ATL, and she didn't necessarily know all the ins and outs of this thing, but I love her eye and her work. I was just like, nah, I'm gonna fight for her. Like, as a Black man, I'm gonna respect this Black woman for her genius and what she's able to do. And like, not just what she's able to do now, but her potential is what she's able to do. So I really fought for that. And that was a small moment of a win for me, because I was just like, these white folks will have you feeling all types of way on set, like feeling like you don't know anything, you shouldn't be there, you don't belong here. Like, it really be like that. And I was just like, the last thing I want to do is head up a set that will make a Black woman feel like that and go home and cry about it or feel bad about it. I was just like, nah, no way. So like, in the privileges I have and the access I have, I'm also trying to do the work, right? Not perfect in every way, but trying to figure out, like, what are the small moments where we're able to have wins for each other as a community is super important, and paying that forward.
That's powerful. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And don't worry, we will not be a stranger. We
Yeah,
will we will email you. I'll share his email if you don't already have it. And we will keep working with you, and just thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you all again. Sorry for talking your ears off. I'm like, yeah, I
Like a
talk.
true African.
Yeah, I could talk a lot sometimes. Like, these are the things I think about in my head. So I'm glad somebody just gets to listen to it. So
Thank you. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.